This file is core.racket, and it implements a typical version of curly where we have numbers and plus and multiply and lambdas, an application, and if zero. And it's got the usual parse function, and we've got the usual interp function, and some tests for interp, and helper functions, number ups and lookups, and so on. So this we've seen many times before. What happens when I want to change this interpreter to support let and case, say? I could change the parse function right here. Another way I could do things is to write a new module, core plus case.racket, that uses core but replaces the parser. We can keep the interpreter the same and just replace the parser. So parse2 looks just like parse, except it includes the usual rewrite of let into lambda, and it includes a rewrite of case into lets and if zero, and so on. So parse2 adds those extensions, and it does not have an interpreter or those other helper functions. It just has the parse2 function. I can parse those things and test that, or I can parse them and then interp them. So here's an example using parse2 and interp together, the interp from core, to parse and interp a function that involves case and calls to the function, and so on. So that all can work, but a drawback to this approach is that my parse2 had to repeat all of the parsing for all the things that were already in curly when I just wanted to add let and case. So I didn't have to change the old implementation, but I had to copy a bunch of the old implementation. Instead of copying all the cases for plus and times and lambda and so on, why don't I just make parse2 call parse? Well, the problem is that doesn't work out right, because if I let parse handle the times form, say, then when it sees the times form, it's going to call parse and not parse2 on the sub-expressions. That is, as soon as we go back into parse, then we've lost any extension that parse2 might provide. We can't put a let or a case under a star. That's the right idea, reusing parse, but we just need a different protocol so that we can get back to parse2 or something like parse2 once we've gone into parse. The idea is that we replace parse with a parse star. Parse star takes the S expression, and in the typical case is going to do all the matching on numbers and lambdas and times and plus and so on. But before it does that, it takes this other function, expand, and expand gets dibs on the S expression to rewrite it to something else potentially. So parse star is going to first call expand on any of its inputs. If expand produces a sum of some expression, then that means it rewrote an S expression to something else, and we want to parse that thing. But instead of calling parse, we call parse star again, keeping the expand function, so that every time we come back around to parse some expression, expand gets a chance to expand it. And then we can define parse. The old parse is just parse star, where the expander function never does anything. But when we have parse2, we can call parse star with this try let case expander. So try let case, when it gets an S expression, is going to see, does it match the let form? If so, then it does the rewrite and wraps it in sum. Does it match the case form? If so, it does the rewrite and match it in sum. Otherwise, it does a none and lets parse star handle all of the things as usual. I set up this example in this pattern in core extensible.racket. So core extensible.racket is just like core, but instead of plain parse, it has parse star that takes this expand expression. And you can see parse star always recurs with parse star, keeping the expand so that every time it looks at an S expression, it first tries to expand the expression. The parse function is defined just as we said. The rest of this file is unmodified. We have tests and so on for expressions that don't involve let and case. But now in core ext plus case, we use core extensible instead of core. Now I can define parse2 in terms of parse. I only have to handle let and case, which is enough work already, but I don't have to deal with lambda and plus and so on. And my test case with parse2 still works out. So less repeated code. It was a more extensible